We made this.
Hello all and welcome to the 91st episode of Pick a Disc, the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. I'm your host Matt Latham, and today I'm welcoming on to the podcast Jacob from the Hits Don't Lie podcast, and he's here to talk about Placebo's Meds from 2006, I think. Was it 2005? I say the right date in the actual interview, so I'm going to past me is going to correct me, even though past me doesn't know I'm an idiot yet. So naturally we talk about all the songs, so, you know, if you've listened to us before, you know what we talk about. We talk about the album, etc, etc, etc. We talk about a bit more about Jacob's kind of past and and him being a kind of dealer in kind of underground British music during college and stuff, and it's quite a fun chat. Quite a fun chat, and we kind of learn stuff about the album whilst we talk about it. So before I press play on the interview, if you are listening to us for the first time and like what you hear and want to hear more, you can subscribe onto any podcast app of choice. You just find Pick a Disc and we're there. If you want to get in contact, you can email us at pickadisc@gmail.com. You can contact us on social media, so it's on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Just search for Pick a Disc. 100% of the time, it is probably me that that thing belongs to. If not, then wow, someone else is using the name, but I doubt it. There's also a Discord server, so if you want to join in, say hello on the Discord, the link is in the show notes. And yeah, I think that is it. I mean, we're in the 90s now, we're gearing up to episode 100. Yeah, that number is in ever so more closer, and it's slowly blowing my mind a bit. But yeah, we've still got quite a few episodes to go before that number, so get ready to start the first proper episode of the 90s with Jacob from Hits Don't Lie. This is the first I've got a guest who's currently in Japan at the moment, and it's Jacob from Hits Don't Lie. So, hey, how you going over there, Jacob? Are you okay?
Yeah, doing good. It's honestly one of the first times I've recorded in the afternoon because I'm normally waking up early to record in my morning with Aaron. So it's a different mood for me.
Yeah, I currently have a week off work, which is like blowing my mind for a bit. I've forgotten that I had a week off
Ooh,
work.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm able to like record at like 9 o'clock in the morning. But one of the reasons I think I bring up Japan as well is that on this date 4 years ago, I was currently on a tour of Japan. So I was trying to figure out. So 4 years ago today, I would have been in, what's the date today? Was I in Kyoto at this point? I was, yeah. So on Wednesday, May the 30th, 2018, I was in Kyoto. So I was at the Golden Temple.
Ooh.
So yeah,
it's beautiful, especially this time of year. So
yeah, it was really nice.
Was great.
Yeah, it was completely coincidental. I only just realised that this is like the anniversary of my Japan trip. But so whereabouts in Japan are you located?
I'm in Tokyo Prefecture, but a little outside of the city.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I still have to take a train ride into the city proper, but you know, I get the benefits of city life when I want it.
Yeah, the rail infrastructure is amazing. As a Brit, I am completely jealous.
Well, as an American, it blows my mind. I mean, we have none, so.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that you didn't go there going, what's that big thing that travels on these tracks? But no, yeah, I mean, it's blew my mind. Like, it was like when we was in Tokyo, and then people were queuing up in lines to get onto the trains, and like,
oh yeah,
yeah. And I was in this like a small group, like it was split 50-50 with like Britons and Americans, and the Britons in our group were just looking at each other going, why are people so organised? It's like, yeah, you just see like New Street in Birmingham and people are trying to push on, and people are trying to get off the same time.
You would not see that here.
Yeah,
I clap for the Japanese people. They love a queue, and the only way the train system would work with how crowded everything can be is if people follow these sort of unwritten rules of just lining up outside the door and then letting people off and not cramming through before everyone is off. It somehow works.
Yeah, and it blows my mind. But I mean, as much as we can talk about the train system of Japan, and
Oh, that's not what we're here for? Oh, sorry.
It's not. No, it's not. Pick a. I can't think of a pun.
Pick a train line.
Yeah. Pick a JR rail pass. I don't know. It doesn't rhyme. Anyway, anyone planning to visit Japan, look into the JR rail pass. They're a godsend. Anyway, so no, we're actually here to talk about music and not right. And I mean,
okay, I can do that. I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to talk about music, and and this is an album that you've picked, and I've joked in the lead up. I feel like I'm getting an exclusive due to, and we'll talk about your Hits Don't Lie near the end. For anyone who hasn't read the what album we're covering on the podcast app, when you tell the listeners the disc that you've picked for us today.
The disc that I want to talk about today is Meds by Placebo.
Meds from the British band Placebo, released on the 13th of March 2006 on Virgin Records. Why have you picked this disc?
I'm sure we all have these, but this disc to me is one of those that just takes me back to a certain time in my life. And I will just revisit it several times a year. And I think I was just in the mood to revisit it and thought, you know what? This would be a great one to talk about on Pick a Disc.
What I found quite interesting, was you picking this, and your podcast Hits Don't Lie, you kind of delve very much into kind of pop, very much in the pop realm of themes. So I think you've hinted a couple of times on Hits Don't Lie about a kind of either alternative / indie sordid past, and I'm here to
sordid past. Listen, I'm very proud of my alt rock indie vibes that I also listen to. It's just that on Hits Don't Lie, it's mostly about the music that my lifelong friend Erin and I share and love together, and it's not her thing. So it's, songs like this aren't going to come up on that podcast probably. But yeah, I have a big history of these sorts of artists, some more rock focused emotional music.
Okay, so how did you get into kind of that scene and Placebo specifically?
The scene? I don't know. I think I was just a little angsty, emotional kid around that time.
Oh, everyone was. It's fine.
Everyone was, right? I had nothing to want for. I had a very privileged life, but as a, closeted teen in a religious South of the United States, I, internally was kind of going through some things and found music like Bright Eyes, The Format. Sadly, I was really into Dashboard Confessional. We don't talk about it anymore, but and I think I found Placebo. It was either by just browsing the iTunes store at the time, because this was 2006 before streaming services. You have to actually go and find and buy the album. Mm-hmm. Or I was really into the blogs, like any alt rock or indie blogs at the time. So maybe I found it through there. But yeah, they just really struck me.
Oh, okay. So do you remember the specific moment you discovered Placebo? Or was there a moment where you listened, who are these? And then it clicked?
I don't remember the specific moment. I do remember driving around in my car listening to them a lot because this was the year that I went to university. So I just remember being with them a lot, being like by myself with this album a lot. That's my main memory and attachment to them.
Was it Meds that you discovered them, or was it before? Was it any albums beforehand? So was it specifically this album that you discovered first?
Truthfully, Meds was the only one that I discovered first, and it's the only one I've ever listened to. I thought about before doing this, doing a little more research into them, but I thought, no, in the spirit of Pick a Disc, I'm just going to let myself be true to myself here. I've only ever listened to this album.
Oh, okay. Is any reason why you haven't delved, or is it just you've not had chance to, or you just had no inkling, or?
I don't know. It's a mystery. I just haven't done it. I want to. Like I said, I pushed down the desire to before this, so I'll probably will later. But it's just never been something I got around to, I guess.
Okay, so as soon as you hit stop, you're going, okay, Spotify, give me all the Placebo. All the Placebo. All the
big possibility.
Yeah. for me, I say I've never been, I'd say not a fan of Placebo. I only know certain songs by them. So I don't know. I don't know how big they were in America, but they gained kind of like a cult following in the UK. So I think they released, I think one of their first singles was from their first album, which was Nancy Boy, and in my head that's the song that I associate with them the most. So I don't know if you're familiar with that song or...
No, not at all.
Okay, yeah, so I think this was in 97, so I was about 11, 12, and at the time, it was quite notorious and kind of, it kind of got either gained / controvert, not massive amount of controversy, but it got into kind of like of, it gained attention because of its kind of gender-bending content, like lyrics. So, like, because, for example, if I just bring up the lyrics to Nancy Boy. So, yeah, and so, so Brian Molko's, like, just talking about, like, it's like guy and stuff, and he ends up with the greatest lay I ever had. And at the time, it was like, hang on, this male vocalist in 1997 is talking about perhaps sleeping with other men. And I was like...
Bold for
yeah.
97.
Yeah, but then also in the same kind of song, he's also kind of talking about his brain being twisted and kind of having kind of weird feelings towards women as well. And it's, yeah, so it kind of, it threw the press, and this was just coming off the back of kind of Britpop, and the Spice Girls had like hit at this point.
Right.
So he had the kind of indie trying to fashion a new identity post kind of the fall of Britpop, and then you had like Placebo come out and say this kind of things, and with lyrics such as "What a gas, such a beautiful ass" in a song that was able, that 11 to 12-year-olds were able to listen to and stuff. But then other than that, they didn't really have any kind of other hits that I was kind of constantly aware of. But then I think Every Me, Every You, I think from the album afterwards, I think that must have been on like on a soundtrack or something, because I have memories of that song. But other than that, I never really got or really listened to Placebo. I have friends that did, but I never kind of delved into. And I think listening to this, I was like, I was listening and I was going, why haven't I? I really like this. Yeah. So I'll get that at the back now. I really like this. This is up there with perhaps one of my favourite kind of albums I've been introduced to.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So this is like ticking a lot of box. This is like a lot of box ticking for me. I was like, it's kind of like almost alternative, very grungy, and so I listened to this, I'm like, yep, I'm really enjoying this. So
it's just so solid, isn't it?
Yeah, everything. It is, yeah. So I think, so I'm practically, apart from a few songs, coming to Placebo fresh. I don't think I knew of any songs on this album. But yeah, so anyone who's wondering if I like this album, I really like this album. I thought it was really good. So I did perhaps start having a quick breeze through and listening to a few of the earlier albums. I only skim listened to them, so I think I'm kind of like you. I thought, okay, what I'll do, I'll wait for the recording to happen, and then I'll delve back just to listen to their earlier and later stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know much about Placebo or a lot about history, or is it more or less just this album? So do you know much about them at all, or?
It's genuinely just this album. I knew that they were from London. That's it. That's it. That's the extent of my knowledge of Placebo, really. Aside from this album that I've played for years and years and years.
So, so for anyone who don't know, Placebo are a British rock band formed in London in 1994 by vocalist, guitarist Brian Molko and bassist guitarist Stephen Olsdale. Drummer Robert Schelsberg joined in late 1994 but left in 96 shortly after the release of the album due to conflicts with Molko, and was replaced the same year by Steve Hewitt. So they gained exposure in 97. They stood out during the Britpop scene as they were associated at the time for their, I can never pronounce this properly, androgynous, is that right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so there was often associated for the time for their androgynous appearance and musical content and lyrics which openly discuss sexuality, mental health, and drug use.
I can see that because at that time in music was so just, I don't want to say generic. The music wasn't generic. The topics were just so sanitized and like, we're just going to have fun and sing about partying and not really push any buttons. So I can see them coming up with a topic that people maybe weren't so comfortable with talking about.
Yeah,
major.
Yeah, I think particularly like the late 90s. I think at the moment there's particularly now. I think there's a lot more. Well, over the last few years, there's been a lot more kind of openness, particularly with the LGBTQ community, like discussing and with topics discussing like all sorts of aspects of the sexuality spectrum, and I think Placebo are kind of one of the. Don't quote me on this, but from my perspective, they were one of the first kind of like British indie bands at that time to kind of do that on a slightly more mainstream level, although as mainstream as I was getting anyway. So yeah, but they've collaborated with all sorts of artists over the years. So they've worked with David Bowie, Justin Warfield, Michael Stipe, and Alison Mosshart. And to date, they've released 8 albums, and all of which have reached the top 20, and overall have sold around 11 million albums worldwide. So,
nice.
So they kind of like, let's say, broke the mold. Is that the right term? They were not easily to fit in a box. So they were slightly different. And I think the music press was slightly unsure how to handle that, particularly at the time as well.
Yeah, you see that a lot with bands that aren't like anything else at the time. The music press is like doesn't know how to talk about them, doesn't know what to ask them, or even their companies sometimes don't know how to promote them just because they're so different and it's not within the formula that they're used to.
Yeah, but I think it led them to, I think they kind of like, from what I gathered, they kind of stayed true to who they are, and like Brian Molko's lyrics just never kind of dipped, or they kind of kept that kind of openness and kind of ambiguity in terms of lyrics and like their lyrics and such, and I think it gives them an almost unique place in the kind of British indie canon.
Yeah,
at the time. So, and I think it's only been since like the last couple of years where they're kind of like that. It's been a lot more open, particularly in like in either indie or pop music as well. So, the album itself. So apparently they planned to record a more electronic sound, but their producer Dmitry Tikovoy, I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure how that's pronounced. He's like a French record producer who's worked with Placebo, Charlie XCX, Black Honey, Becky Hill, Nicola Roberts. Well, okay, Nicola Roberts. Okay, that's interesting. I've only just read that on his.
That's a weird spread of people.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
from Placebo to Nicola. That's a weird spread.
I need to find it. Okay, he's got credits on the Trip the Light Fantastic by Sophie Alex Bextor as well. I was not expecting.
What can't this man do?
Yeah, I'm quickly scanning these Wikipedia articles to try and find out where this Nicola Roberts thing is. I can't see her name on here at all. No, I can't. Where is that? I can see the horrors. Oh, Cinderella's Eyes. So. Okay. He produced over half of Cinderella's Eyes by Nicola Roberts.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. So that's the link between Nicola Roberts from Girls Aloud and Placebo, which
we found it.
Yeah. So so that's a pub quiz question for you. But yeah, so he suggested a back to basics approach, which Molko was said to was quoted saying that it was producers agenda. Really, we didn't know about which we didn't really know about until we got to the studio. We were in a place that was very much about samplers and computers and vintage synthesizers. This recording session really became about playing a game. We were in an old school studio, so there were no real tricks to hide behind. So, because
interesting.
Yeah, so there is kind of like a lot of just like straight band playing, and what I mean by that is that it just feels like a lot of a band playing and you just got microphones aimed at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I find that quite interesting where the...
I can't imagine some of these if they went a little more electronic or gimmicky with them, because so many of these songs, it just feels like they're playing live for you. It doesn't feel over processed, even though the guitar may have some weird thing on it. It all sounds so real, if that makes sense.
Yeah. They may have just like done the kind of recorded each track separately and stuff, but it does feel like more they just recorded like the guitar track through. And I think if you ever saw them play this live, I feel it would be very, very similar to what you hear on the record. But yeah, so on the theme of the record as well. So there's a lot of Marco was saying that there's a lot of songs about drinking as well as like the effects and dangers about it, and there's a lot of songs about getting drunk. And
a lot.
And what I've gathered is that as well. So there's a lot of like songs about drinking and everything. And considering that like it seems like it's the main theme of the record, I find the kind of name Meds, which is now named after the original song, quite interesting. So and like for example, medication, like short for medication, or meds, which I think is like I think it's slang. I think it's more American slang for prescription pills more than British. I think the term meds I only ever hear in American drama. But I find it quite interesting that because medication is like an external chemical that is meant to kind of change either a physical or a mental state. And I think it's interesting that they apply this to alcohol, but because meds are usually supposed to be something prescribed for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, in that song, Meds, if we're just dipping into the song, someone else is asking him over and over, "Baby, did you forget your meds?" And so you wonder if it is this person asking about actual prescription medication, or just a person saying like, "Have a drink, you're being weird, and you're weird when you're not sober." So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's quite, and this think it's quite interesting that they call that the whole album. So you've got that kind of idea of kind of medication is apparent throughout the whole thing. So, and again, I can't talk about people who've got alcohol addiction or addiction to anything. So I can't talk for them. But I find it quite interesting that they apply something that's supposed to make you feel better. And is given to you by professionals, but then applies it to something that can be easily abused and be detrimental. So,
some form of self-medication that maybe isn't good for you.
And as people use it as like an escape or anything. And so before we go into this, the songs properly, because we might dip back into meds as well. Just what was it about these songs that you liked?
I don't know, because, I mean, you touched on it. The whole meaning of the album is pretty deep into alcoholism and drug abuse, which is not something I've ever experienced. So it's not something that I really attach to. I think it was really just the time in my life when I listened to this. And when I think of this song, I mean, of course, like I said, it takes me back to starting at university. And one thing was weird in university was I grew up in a really small town where the people that I graduated high school with were the same people that I went to daycare with, basically. Like we hardly ever got new people, right? And so a skill that we never learned was how to meet new people and how to make new friends, which you don't think about until you go to university and there's no one else there and you have to make new friends, right? Mm-hmm. And this album and other music that I was listening to at the time was my in for friend groups. I became the person who was finding new music and distributing it to everyone. And that's what this album reminds me of. We would stupidly be drinking to this song and partying to this album about not doing those things. But yeah, that's why I really feel an attachment to it. And now as an adult, as more mature, I can listen to the lyrics and have a better appreciation for them.
I just want to slight deviate topic and stuff. So you talk about you the kind of like distributor of musical finds, like yeah. So I just got this image of you being like a kind of almost drug dealer, but instead of drugs, it's like CD instead of CDs. So you got like because like, hey, do you want some British rock music? I've got some pure quality underground.
Interpol, I've got it.
Yeah. You got people coming up to you I don't know my terminology, onto the quad. I don't know what a quad is, but I know quad is it's an American college term. Going to the quad and go, Jake, I really need my post-hardcore. Please tell me you got some post-hardcore, please.
No, see, I think I was more clever. I wouldn't burn the disc. I would just come to the party with the disc. No one could get it unless you were like a real good friend. So you needed me there. You needed me for the music, right? You couldn't just go off on your own.
So you had to make yourself. That's the only thing. Is like, I goes, you have to invite Jacob. He's got the music.
At the time, I had it all. You remember, like the physical iPods,
yes,
the big white ones. At the time, I had it all in there, so I just traveled with it wherever I went. But yeah, that was my way of making new friends, of just spreading music. And I don't know who was crazy enough to listen to this with me, but it worked.
And what kind of music was that? Was it this kind of music, or was it kind of like a whole spectrum of different things? Or was it also pop music, or were you still in your kind of indie emo phase?
It was a transitional moment, because it was stuff like this and Silver Sun pickups, and then kind of going into more R&B stuff as well, because a party isn't going to want to listen to Pierrot the Clown, his sad song on this album. So you got to have other things on there. But yeah, it was a big transitional period for me as far as music goes.
Oh, okay. And out of interest, when did you kind of pivot back to or pop music? So when you got because we like with the Hits Don't Lie kind of era music, was that always there, or did you find yourself kind of slowly rediscovering that side?
It was always there. There was a moment in time where pop music in the States just wasn't that good, so you can just wipe away those years. But it was always there. But at this time, I was in the closet still, and for a closeted gay person, listening to the gayest, poppiest, bubblegum pop stuff isn't a great way to stay in the closet. So that wasn't something I shared, but I was still secretly listening to it. And probably around when, I accepted who I was and came out, that's when I more openly was more into the pop scene again.
Oh, okay. Again, so as a heterosexual man, I can't really kind of relate to what I'm about to ask, but was you listening to this when you said you was when you was closeted? So did you know much about Brian Molko and the kind of like sexual openness that he has? Or
no, I learned about that today from you.
Oh, okay. So you didn't. Okay, so because one of the questions I was going to ask was I was going to make the assumption, which probably I shouldn't have done, but whether when you're talking about the kind of being closeted, whether you kind of felt where you related to Brian Molko and like the openness of sexuality and stuff, but apparently I only found that today, so which is it?
I mean, I only found out the details today, but there are several artists that I didn't know at the time. Like, I was listening to Savage Garden as a kid and didn't realize the connection there. And then you listen to some albums or some songs on this album, and I can get that feeling of just being othered a little bit, or being questioning, or just confused by yourself. So, I mean, it's there, even if I didn't really know it.
Oh, but like I had female friends who said they were absolutely genuinely gutted when Darren from Surrey's Garden came out. There was, they got, like female friends who like, I had a friend who was like, said she couldn't, like, she was like in depression for a week, like a week afterwards. Like, I'm saying, but you can't hold that against him. He's being his true self. And they're like, but
Listen, ladies, you can't have them all.
Yeah.
You got so many to choose from. Let us have a few.
But yeah, again, I think I can't remember when Darren from Savage Garden was kind of open, but when he came out. But I know again around that time, around like the 97, late 90s, early noughties. Again, it was just something that wasn't around or wasn't open enough. But it's I feel like it's getting a lot easier and everyone's a lot more open over the past few years. But yeah, so in terms of the songs themselves, we've briefly spoken about Meds as the opener, and I think it's a really good choice opener. It's kind of weird.
A first song on the album.
Kind of weird to have the title track first as well, but I think it's like, particularly because a lot of the songs have the same or similar themes, you kind of open up. Mm-hmm. You just open the floodgates. You go, no, this is what you do. So what was it about this song that drew you, or that you like about this song?
I mean, I just love the sound of it. First off, the guitar, it's just so perfect. But the whole topic of him just saying all these things that are going wrong with him, and then someone coming in just saying, did you forget to take your meds? Well, just take your medicine. What about just taking your meds? Why don't you take your medicine? Kind of thing. It just is so good. I don't know. It's just so good. I've never been in that situation, but I can see how frustrating it would be to be like calling out for help or going through these things and people just repeating at you over and over, take your meds, take your meds, take your meds. Yeah.
And again, this is something that I feel has only been again the last few years. And I'm saying this album's like, feels like it's starting to be, I'm thinking this album's ahead of its time. Because quite a lot of the stuff it's talking about or hinting at feels like it's a lot more open to be discussion now.
Yeah.
Whereas I think particularly with everyone feeling a lot more open to talk about mental health and anyone who feels kind of like, who has any kind of mental health disorder or any issues they have, I think people are starting to get a lot more, I think they're less inclined to say, oh, just take your medication, take your pills or anything, which is usually, it was probably just the answer to everything back in like 2006.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, and it feels like the kind of songs criticising that mentality, which I think is what people are doing now. They're criticising that response to mental health, and this song was doing it in 2006, and yeah, it kind of feels like it's like about 16 years ahead of that conversation.
I agree.
But yeah, what's the next song you want to talk about that you really quite like?
Well, the next one on the album, Infrared, is just a hit. It's just such a hit for me.
Okay, and what was it about that triggered that response?
It just feels like the perfect I'm drunk and angry and want to get revenge song in a bad way. Bad way, but sometimes you want that mood. Sometimes you are mad and you have a drink and you want to feel that revenge. Like no one's going to get away from you. It's such a powerful song. It just lets all the emotions out. And it's one of my favorites of the whole album, easily.
Yeah, I think one of the things it's got going for it as well is that I really quite like the chorus. It's not exactly poppy, but there's a catchiness to it. But it doesn't feel like so it's not like a pop hook that you'll probably get in kind of like more kind of poppy, or as I like to refer to it as like bubble grunge, kind of like choruses, which is like a hybrid of bubblegum pop and grunge music, which it's my moment to say it's an actual genre. I will fight for that case. But yeah, so it doesn't feel like it's a poppy chorus, but it still has that kind of element where you kind of find yourself humming to it.
Oh yeah, it stays with you. It's really catchy.
Yeah, I was trying to think about why he uses the term infrared, which is just basically like a way of scanning stuff. I was trying to figure out what he was trying to get at with that. And I don't know whether it's just him linking kind of either something that's used for search for something with rage. Because I think songs about revenge and rage and stuff. So I'm just wondering whether he uses that kind of, because the colour red is always associated with that. But I was trying to figure out whether he was just
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I think of infrared, one of the applications would be like military infrared to find the target at night or something where you really cannot hide even in the dark. So maybe he was trying to link that, or just that he's so zooted on drinks and pills that, you know, he can't even see normally. He sees an infrared and he's gonna find you.
Yeah, I think because like the red, is it red mist where it's like or seeing red, which is the kind of the idiom for just being really angry and at someone. But yeah, when the lyrics, I'm coming on infrared, forget you're running, I will find you. And like probably infrared is probably what's used to try and track, track military targets.
Yeah.
Yeah. But according to Genius, there's apparently a reference to a Smith song, because there's a Smith song called Unhappy Birthday, back when Morrissey was an idiot.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a reference.
Yeah, there's a Smith song I think called Unhappy Birthday, where it's, I come to wish you an unhappy birthday because you're evil and you lie. And they're just, whenever there's a Smith reference for something, I just feel so sad that Morrissey turned out to be Morrissey. But it's Johnny Marr's band. So, from Johnny Marr's band. Where do you want to move on to next?
Well, one of my favorites that I genuinely have no clue what it's even about, but it's one of my favorites just to sing and listen to, is Follow the Cops Back Home. I really like this. It's one that just stays with me. I genuinely have no idea what this song is about. So if you know, please educate me. But it's so much fun to listen to.
So, yeah, again, a lot of this is coming from Genius and from an interview that Brian Marco did with Rock Mag. And you know, and considering what you was telling me a bit earlier about when you was growing up in a small town, this might be interesting to see. Might be interesting to get your view on what he said the song's about. It's mainly inspired by Iceland. He said, so when he was there, it was summer during the 24 hours of sunshine. We calculated 3% of the population came to our gig, despite it being a very small concert. Nobody lives out there, and while we're driving through the countryside to see the volcanoes and geysers, we didn't see a single cop. It was so weird. And he goes, you wonder what people do over there. And 2 weeks ago, I met Sigur Rós. Those guys are 25 and they've got 7-year-old kids. Seeing that, I said, are you crazy? Is there really so little to do in Iceland? And they replied, yeah, that's why we get drunk and fuck. But then the trip to Iceland inspired us, and you made us think about what you do when you live in a place like Luxembourg or Iceland where there is nothing to do. Most of the time, you just go looking for trouble. In the end, this track, like many of the album, talks about alcohol. You get completely wasted in the bar. You fall on another guy who's equally pissed. You decide he's your new best friend, and straight away you go and do stupid things. This particular stupid thing, is to follow the cops back home and rob their houses. After having listened to this, if some guy thinks it's a good idea, then he deserves to get caught. It's the stupidest thing you can do.
You know, I love that. I love that I had this connection to this song without even knowing it, because that is what you do when you live in a small town. You do stupid stuff for entertainment.
Yeah, and because you said earlier that because you live in like in a very small town and like you pretty much knew everyone. So like everyone that you met in like preschool, you pretty much was sat next to in your graduation part. So this, so it's kind of influenced by kind of very small town where you're like in a very small environment or a very kind of like slow town, and I'm beginning to think that I'm getting to get the impression that there's a lot of stuff that you've related to, but you never realised you've related this. Yeah,
just subconsciously. Yeah. I'm really gooped over here. I have a bigger connection to this than I thought.
This must be what therapists feel like. Don't quote me on that. I am not a therapist.
Well, yeah, we would do some really stupid stuff growing up. I mean, you drink early just because there's nothing else to do in the town, and you just drive around on gravel roads and you make your own entertainment. We never followed any cops back home, but I know some people who ran away from cops. Or I know we would toilet paper teachers and principals' houses just because we could, because we were bored. What do you do?
I think it's quite an interesting different culture where I think we went like when I kind of grew up, there were within about 5 minutes walks from each other, like several different primary schools or elementary schools in equivalent. And like you'd have like because you'll have secondary schools, which is kind of like a mix between middle and high school, and you'll have about 200 odd students in each year, but you'll only have about 3 or 4 from an elementary school. So you'll mix with so many different people. Like there'll be instances where you're the only person from primary school going to big school. And so it's kind of like a culture shock, or at least different culture from where I am anyway. So like growing up and being in the same kind of class with people is kind of weird. Like it blows my mind when I'm watching kind of US dramas and people know where teachers live. For example, I know teachers who probably live about an hour's drive away from the school. So, but then again in where I'm from or where I work, there's about at least 8 or 9 different kind of secondary schools or high schools within like about 10 minutes drive from each other. So it's, and we hardly knew anyone from other schools and stuff. It's that kind of small town kind of mentality. It's not alien, but it's something I always find quite interesting to explore or seeing stuff. So it's interesting. It's always been quite interesting, particularly like shows like Friday Night Lights, where everyone knows everyone. That just blows my mind. But yeah, I mean, again, I think as well is that, and I always quite like talking about sequencing of albums. It's a slightly slower song that comes from slightly heavier, not energetic, but it's the first kind of moment for you to kind of just relax and regain yourself. And the kind of chorus just allows it's slow enough and to kind of impact you and stuff. And it's one of my favourites from the album for sure. So any other
good.
Any other comments on this before we move on?
No, just that everyone should go and just lay on the floor and listen to it. That's how I suggest listening to the song.
Okay, so where do you want to go to next?
Where do I want to go to next? I mean, Because I Want You, maybe? It's also one of my favorites on this album. Again, this one is very obvious about drinking from the very beginning. And it's another one of these where he just belts out the same thing over and over again, but I don't get tired of it. Yeah.
Again, in that same interview with Rock Mag, he goes, it was our first single in the UK. I'd rather not say anything about it. You just need to listen to the lyrics. Everything's explained in them, which is
okay, so it's a song? Jeez, thanks.
I quite like that. I quite like the fact that he just says, you know what, feel free to have your own kind of interpretation of these lyrics. Guys, I'm not doing your job for you.
It is a little bit more straightforward. I mean, it seems to be he gets drunk and calls up someone, maybe, but he knows it's not a good idea. It's just a very listenable song.
Yeah, and what I think it is as well, I think he's kind of just saying, for the chorus anyway, I think he's just saying that, okay, I'm going to get drunk, I'm going to say things, don't take them as gospel, don't believe them.
Yeah.
Because, so like you might just, so if he calls up drunk and goes like, give up on your dreams, do this, blah, 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 don't, because even if I want you to,
because I'm stupid
don't.
And I'm drunk and don't listen to me.
Yeah. So basically, I might have these opinions, but ignore my opinions. So, which is kind of weird and toxic in a certain way, I think, because like he's like, he's saying to a partner, don't give up on the dream and don't give up on the wanting and everything that's true. Don't give up on the wanting because I want you to. So is the narrator of the song saying that I want you to give up stuff, but don't?
Yeah, well, which two is it? Is it T-O or is it T-O-O?
It's T-double-O. So
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be either way. You could see it as because I want you to give up on these things while I'm drunk, or because I also want you, even though I'm saying these stupid things to you while I'm drunk. I think you could see it. I think that was clever wordplay. I think they meant that.
Okay, so the Genius lyrics have the T-double-O, but then the song title removes that too. So
it's very ambiguous.
I wonder if the liner notes have the lyrics in the
I don't know,
in the actual album, because if they don't, if they do, they might answer that question. But if they don't, then the ambiguous nature.
Ambiguity.
The ambiguity, that's it. Thank you, Jacob. At least one of us can talk normal English. The ambiguity of that kind of... I never thought about that, actually. So yeah, that's made me like the song even more because of that kind of cleverness to it. So you can have a lot more interpretation. That kind of quote from Brian Molko is less kind of arrogance, more no.
Oh yeah, maybe he doesn't want to give up. He doesn't want to give up the mystery.
Maybe he wants us to do it because he wants us to. Initially, I mean, I failed, but initially because I want you, I was trying to tie this in to see whether it can be linked to because we want to by Billy Piper, but I couldn't think of a link. Because we want it. No, I can't. No. Because that was initially, I initially saw that and initially saw the title and I misread it and immediately, Because We Want To by Billy started playing in my head, but... Well, yeah, anyone listening, Honey to the Bee is a great album and I will die on that hill.
Controversial yet brave.
Yeah. So any other songs you want to move on? You want to briefly talk about as well?
Well, one that is not listed on the album in Spotify that I'm positive I had on my album when I got this is their cover of Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill.
Oh, okay.
And, I mean, everyone has already said everything about the genius of the song of Running Up That Hill, but Placebo singing that was my introduction to that song. I don't know how. I just had not interfaced with it before that. And it's a brilliant cover. I still search it out. It's not on the album on Spotify, so I'd make it like a different playlist and put that one on because it's on another of their albums. And it's just a really great cover.
Oh, okay. I don't think I'll listen to that, and I don't think I'll listen to that version of the album this is on. And I'm trying to remember the song off the top of my head, and I'm drawing a blank, which is good for a music podcast house, Matthew.
You definitely know the song. It's been covered a million times just because it's a top 10 out of 10, 100% perfect song.
Yeah, I'm knowingly drawing a blank. I'm gonna listen to it as soon as we finish, and I'm gonna go, oh, that was that song. Again, I didn't listen to it on the lead up, but I think it's quite interesting that like how some people kind of associate bonus tracks to an album, and like how as an addendum or songs that are quote unquote bonus tracks. So and I think it kind of changes the kind of relationship someone has with an album as well. So like if it always ends with that track, it's always been a part of that album. Like I think at the top of my head, I'm thinking of kind of Blink-182's Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, where they have all the joke songs at the end after quite a serious album. And it kind of like, so when people talk about it, they'll have different versions with different songs on it. So is that running up that hill always been a part of this album then for you?
For me, definitely. Yeah, I was upset that the Spotify version didn't add it. I only listen to things as albums. So when I'm thinking of songs, if I've listened to the album a lot, I will just, when a song ends, my brain goes to the next song because I don't do it in random. I just listen to it in track order. So I just memorize it by that. And so when it's not there in the album, it trips me, and I want it there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the same as well. So, so when you say that you listen to things as albums, so you're not a playlist person, so you'll listen to majority of things.
I'm trying to become a playlist person, but I've never been a playlist person. I mean, if you're going to a party, whatever, you're not actually actively listening to music, right? So you can make a playlist for that. For background music, fine. But when I sit down to and enjoy music, I want albums.
Okay.
And I'm trying now to make playlists for every month of this year. That's my goal for this year. But I still find myself just picking an album and putting it on.
Yeah, no, it's the same. I think I'm slowly getting more into kind of playlists. That's mainly because albums from artists haven't come out yet. But yeah, and again, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast, and I think one of the reasons that this podcast exists is I've always been a fan of the album as a whole, as a concept, in that an artist has specifically put in songs in an order, in that, right, specifically to take you on a journey from track 1 to track 10, 12, 13, 15, etc., etc.
Right.
So I've always been kind of like in that mindset. I think when you listen to singles, because singles are kind of like isolated moments, or kind of like clips from like YouTube clips of a greater movie, for an analogy. So that's always been it's kind of weird when you think about it. It's just like that's weird. That feels like you're saying, I'll take 2 minutes of Avengers Endgame, put it into a list, and then after that's finished, I'm gonna have 5 minutes from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Then I'm gonna have, I don't know, 2 minutes of The Notebook, and I'm gonna play though. I'm just gonna play those clips from films in, which is yeah.
Well, there are artists and songs that are made to be listened to as singles, and there's nothing wrong with that. If they just make an album of singles, that's fine. That's still enjoyable. But I always really, really appreciate a well-organized album that tells a story all the way through.
No, I totally agree. And I think if anyone listening doesn't fully understand what we're talking about, if you get to a position where you're taking songs that you've listened to on albums for ages, I think as Jacob's describing, and then you put them into a playlist, and then as that song starts playing in a playlist, if your brain doesn't automatically start thinking and expecting the next song in the album to appear, but then another song from a different completely artist plays in, that's when you know that you're in the album mindset.
Yeah, it throws you.
Yeah, like say I've brought this playlist up in the past where I've got a playlist just full of first songs from albums. So I've got some of my favourite opening tracks are just on this one playlist, and it's fun, but it messes with my head. I'll put that on shuffle, and then it'll just be like, Speakers Push the Air by Pretty Girls Make Graves comes on, and I'm like, that's one of my favourite opening tracks, and then I'm expecting the next song to appear, and then suddenly it's Dark Rip by Teen Girl Scientist Monthly, and I'm like, wait a sec.
I wanted that second song.
Yeah, so yeah, it'd be like you just putting Meds on a playlist, and then right once that finishes, you start expecting Infrared to play, and then suddenly Lady Gaga appears. Yeah. So I think we've got time for one more song. Is there any other song that you definitely want to briefly mention before we begin?
I mean, we can go to the very end of the album, Song to Say Goodbye. It's a very emotional closeout to the album. It's probably one of the most forward with its use of talking about drug use and trying to save someone from it, even if they're not fully on board, maybe.
From, again, going back to that kind of Rock Mag interview that's been posted up on under Genius Annotations, he said about the song, the theme of Song to Say Goodbye is keeping only the best aspects of your life. It's the first track I wrote in India. I went over there for a lot of reasons, one of them being to try and change my style of life. I wanted to make myself understand that I couldn't become a rock and roll cliche and that the world didn't need another dead rock star. It was written as a letter to myself.
Oh.
Thinking with that in mind, and considering it's, and as we were just talking about the deliberate placing and where songs go onto an album as a whole, it feels like it is the kind of encapsulation of the previous 12 songs, in that those songs have been talking about like alcohol addiction and kind of self-medicating and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is Brian Molko like turning around and kind of like performing an intervention on himself.
Yeah. I love that. I love that he was able to turn toward his craft of music to help himself through that.
Yeah, and it's him just like, and he's saying, I think it just works as like a letter to yourself. So like where people have in the past, I've seen people who have probably like wrote a letter at a certain time and then album it up years later. This is kind of like the reverse of that. It's just saying that with the example I've given, then there's an impact that can be made, but you can never do the reverse, which is, I think, what this song is wanting to do, but can't. So it's basically a letter to his future self. Well, actually, no, it's a letter to his present self. Actually, I think it's a letter to his present day self. So
yeah, it's trying to snap himself out of it.
Yeah, so like, now I'm breaking down your door to try and save your swollen face. Though I don't like you anymore, you lying, trying waste of space. Which is like, basically like like the mental state of an introspective person, who's in a period of disliking themselves, which is very relatable. I mean, like, the amount of like introspective kind of breakdowns I've had in the past.
Yeah, I think we can all be there, even if it isn't through drug use. We probably all had that moment and been like, oh, why are you like this? Why are you doing this? And he goes through it publicly in this song, but he kind of comes out, saying some nice things about himself toward the end.
Yeah. And I think as well, particularly when I think as he said he was writing this in India, which, as like, historically being a kind of like very kind of spiritual place, particularly with musicians. So yeah, going all the way through to like the Beatles, who like went to India to find peace or just like to experience another way of thinking and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of feel the impact of that on this. So like, yeah, so, Blessed with Lucky Sevens, which is a kind of, the number 7 is, I don't know the exact kind of thing, but it's always been kind of associated with luck and like a token or a kind of like superstition that it's lucky to have that number.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good, I think it's a kind of good kind of closer for that album. And again, probably not one you put in a playlist at a party.
No, but I think it's a great way to end the album of just full circle moments.
So we're going to brief talk about the reception of the album and its performance. It did quite well in a few countries. In Austria, Belgium, and France, and Mexico, and Switzerland, it got to number 1 on their album charts. It got to number 2 in Germany, Finland. No, it just went to number 2 in Germany. It went to 3 in Finland. In the UK albums chart, it got to number 7. In the US Heatseekers album chart, it got to 9. And in the US Billboard 200, it got to 180. Is that I'm assuming the Billboard charts, the overall every genre?
Yeah. Yeah. The top 100 would be overall. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it got to 180. Okay, so it got 180, and it got to number 9 in the Heatseekers albums, which from Billboard, which I don't know what that one is.
I don't know what Heatseekers is supposed to mean, but I'm glad they got up there.
Yeah, as a purpose of highlighting the sales by new and developing musical recording artists.
Okay.
Which is interesting for a band at the time that were 12 years old. On their 4th album, going on to
the American scene is so weird with UK acts. Even if they were 8 years old in the UK, if they have a good album in the States, we'll say it was their first. It's so weird.
Oh wow, that probably explains why Apple were like, oh my god, we just found this new Irish act called U2. We're going to give you their album. Yeah, you'll never have heard of these before. We're going to give you the album on every phone immediately. In terms of reception, it's got 65 out of 100 on Metacritic. It got favourable reviews throughout. Some places it got mixed. It got 8 out of 10 on the NME. It got 4 out of 10 in Pop Matters.
4 out of 10?
Yeah. So Jonathan Kiefer Slant wrote that it finds successful band doing just a little to tinker with their proven formula. Mixed reception. Mackenzie Wilson of AllMusic called Meds as bare and honest as Placebo have ever been, thanks to the French producer Dimitri Dukovoy's straightforward approach to getting the band to make a bona fide rock record. There's a fresh vulnerability and a sense of danger too. Robert Christgau, who's been brought up on the podcast in the past, was mixed in reception. He said, but they called it their most effective album as an album, though. So Q Magazine called it easily their most focused album. Music OMH called it darker than their predecessors. And as harrowing Meds is as close to Placebo have come to that perfect album. Have you ever seen Placebo live?
No, I think I would love to after I discover more of their songs. If they're still touring, I don't even know.
I'm going to do that amazing kind of perfect professionalist thing that podcasters do and just live Google during a record. So I think they had a album out this year, I think. A new album out this year. So I think they should be touring.
They must be, right? I'd love the chance to.
Yeah, so... yeah, they are. They are touring. Everywhere, all around. They're in the UK. They're in Birmingham in the 8th of December. So yeah, they're actively touring. There's a lot of touring going on. They're doing a lot of the kind of European nice. Tours. They're in the US briefly. They're in the usual places. Italy.
Yeah, I'd probably have to go somewhere else. I doubt they'll be coming to Japan.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to see if there was going in there because they're a band I could see playing Fuji Rock. I could probably. Oh right. They can. I could easily see them at that. I remember seeing like a couple of the old lineups of that, and I was like, oh, okay, that looks like a pretty decent lineup. But unfortunately, they're not not playing Japan. Unfortunately, but so. You said this is the only album of theirs that you've listened to, so I can't really ask you where to go to next. Okay, no. But I think what I might do is that I might go all the way back to their first album because basically on the basis that so their debut album is self-titled Placebo from 1996, which is about 10 years before this album. I might go and listen to that. I'm going to personally go and listen to that because that's the song with Nancy Boy on it, which has always been in the back of my head, and I've always liked that song.
Right.
Yeah, and it's probably got their most kind of catchy, poppyest kind of chorus as well. So yeah, I'm going to listen to that.
Well, how about you go and listen to the first one? I'll listen to their latest one.
Okay.
That's where I'm going to go next.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to listen to that. Well, to be fair, I have got a Spotify playlist where I've just put all their albums into a playlist. I'm going to probably... I think I might just play that while I'm in the background while I'm editing this episode later today. So...
Nice.
So yeah, but again, if any Placebo bands... What am I talking about? If any Placebo fans are listening to us at the moment and saying, go listen to so-and-so first, feel free to suggest where we go next. So if anyone wants to kind of guide us in the right direction, feel free to at me at Pickadisc on Twitter. So because I'm very, very keen to listen to a lot more Placebo, particularly after this album. So
well, I'm glad I sparked something in you with this pick.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's a very grunge element to it that I really kind of liked and connected with. So and it's kind of case like I really should have listened to Placebo a lot earlier. But before we finish our conversation properly, we got the most important question to ask. I've got to ask you now, which is the song for the playlist, the Spotify playlist Hall of Fame. So if anyone's listening to us for the first time, what this is that I'm going to ask Jacob to choose one song from this album to go onto the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist, and I cannot veto it. What Jacob says goes, and this will be following a song for episode 90, which I haven't recorded yet. So you have no idea. So there isn't actually a song for you to follow on. But before that is Supermassive Black Hole by Muse. And then before that it's The Streets. So basically you've got a undisclosed song from the Yellow Jackets season 1 playlist to follow, which I can't tell you because we haven't picked it yet. So Jacob, which song do you want to be immortalised forever on the Spotify Hall?
I have really thought about this, and every single day I wake up and it's a new song. For several days, I thought it's got to be Follow the Cops Back Home because that's one of my favorites and it gets stuck in my head. There's so many good lines in that. But I think I'm going to pick Meds. I mean, it's the titular song of the album, but it's so good. It's such a great opener and it's just such a perfect song. I think it's got to be Meds.
Okay, so Meds becomes the 91st, well, supposedly the 91st song, even though there's not 91 songs on the playlist. But so Meds becomes the latest song to go to join that kind of iconic playlist. I'm umming and ahhing. I've been umming and ahhing of creating my own to be released around the 100th, so that people know what my picks were, but I don't know yet. So Meds. We've spoken about Meds and Justifiably, it is a great opener. I appreciate that must have been a very, very tough decision, Jacob, because there is a lot of good songs on there.
Yeah.
So, and we've now reached the end of our conversation, so it's been great to speak to you about this. But so if people want to find you and listen to your podcast, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find Hits Don't Lie wherever you get podcasts, and you can come and talk to me on Twitter at Hits Don't Lie Pod, or you can talk to my better half, Aaron, the co-host of Hits Don't Lie, on Instagram at Hits Don't Lie Pod.
So Hits Don't Lie, it's you and Aaron, you basically go through your childhood / early teens music taste. That's right, is it?
Yeah, we have known each other for over 30 years, and basically our friendship is just centered around music. And so it's just an excuse for us to talk about the music we love and kind of battle it out for a top 5 list of whatever crazy topic we choose for that week.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. The dynamic between you and Aaron is hilarious. And it's a lot of fun. It's a podcast that, like, when a new episode is released, it very much jumps to the top of the queue.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite podcasts.
If someone hasn't listened before, you can check out the Songs of 1995 episode with a familiar voice. Oh, it's a very fun episode to start with.
Yeah. The guest you had was a bit I'm not a fan of the guest you had for that. Yeah, it's me being self-deprecating about myself again. Don't worry, people. I'm not being horrible towards an innocent person. The guest is me. I went on to talk about the songs from 1995 because I think that's like that was the year I got my first CD player. And say any fans of Batman Forever will really like that episode.
You know what? Around that time, several episodes have Batman Forever soundtrack songs on it. Aaron was going through a phase. I don't know what it was.
But yeah, I was going. And potentially sooner, perhaps rather than later, you may be hearing Jacob and Aaron on Bigger Disc. Perhaps in the future. Subtle hint. But yeah, I can't recommend Hits Don't Lie enough.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you had a very good crossover with Songs for When. So George, who a few episodes ago, who did Kissing's Grave. So it's basically so anyone who listens to Songs for When, basically Hits Don't Lie is the US equivalent of Song for When. They're like kind of like.
Except they were really clever and just made a podcast where they could be friends, and Aaron and I centered the whole podcast on us fighting about songs at the end. So that's really on us. That's our mistake, I guess. As
listeners, we wouldn't have it any other way. If there's not some kind of name calling, or almost if if we suddenly if there's the threat of you never speaking to each other again, I don't think the podcast wouldn't be as interesting. Keeps listeners on this hose. So yeah, and with that we've come to the end of our conversation, and Jacob, I can't thank you enough for finally getting me to listen to Placebo. I've genuinely
Thank you. This was so much fun to talk about this album.
Yeah, and again, as I said on the start, I feel like I've got an exclusive into tapping into a side of your music taste.
Only here, only on Pick a Disc.
Yes, only on Pick a Disc. And thank you ever so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.